Hello, Ted here with Whole Latte Love, and I have the Gaggia Brera, specifically the silver one right now, in front of me. There is the black one. It doesn't matter. This video is basically going to explain how to get to your grinder, clean and calibrate it if you need to do so, or if you need to replace it. So first thing you got to do, make sure the machine is unplugged. I like to remove all the accessories because I move the machine around a lot when I'm working on them at my bench. So I'm just going to remove all the accessories, make sure your dump box is out, your water tank, be careful if it has water, you don't want to spill it around. I mean, if you do, you can always wipe it up. But we're just going to remove everything off the machine. So first thing you can do is you can take off the finger guard, and the only tools that you're going to need is basically a flat blade screwdriver. That's just to pry a clip apart. The T10 screwdriver, or some kind of screwdriver with bits that you can put into it. It's a star-shaped Phillips or screw bit or screwdriver, and then you're going to want a T20. And the only one that you need this for is the finger guard screw. So that's what we're going to do next. The finger guard is this dome-looking thing in here. It prevents you from putting your fingers in the grinders in case you ever wanted to for whatever reason. I don't know.
Now you do want to empty the beans out too, right?
Yeah, it's easier without the finger guard in the way.
Yeah, okay.
So we're just, if you do have some beans in here, which does happen, you can like fish them out or whatever you want. You can poke them with the thing and like scrape them out of it. But you got to screw down in the middle here, and we're going to undo that screw with our T20. And you're just going to unthread it until it feels like it's unscrewed all the way. And it'll basically hit like a spot where it feels like it's skipping. And you can kind of hear it at the same time. It's unscrewed. This is a magnetic tip screwdriver, so I usually just keep my finger over the hole, make sure the screw doesn't come out with it, because I want the screw to stay in there.
Okay.
All right, so because you have a brass collar in here that acts as a spacer between the screw and the finger guard. If that brass collar isn't in there and you forget to put it back in when you put the finger guard back on, you go to operate the machine, what it's going to do is it's going to spin that screw in, and it's going to spin it into the plastic.
Don't want that.
And it'll distort, melt, it'll do a bunch of stuff to this collar on the plastic, and then your grinder will have a hard time moving because it'll kind of like go over the auger. It'll cause problems. So just make sure that brass collar is in there between the screw and the finger guard.
Okay.
So that's why I usually just leave it in there.
Don't lose it.
And then if I set it aside to try to make sure it doesn't tip over.
Sure.
If it does, just like I said, make sure the collar and the screw is in there. Now that the finger guard's out of the way, you can empty your beans out a lot easier if you have any in here. You can vacuum them out. At this point, the machine is like without the accessories in it. You can tip it on its side and dump your beans out on the counter or whatever you want to do. If you want to save them, you can do that also. Okay. But once you got the beans pretty much cleared out of here, you don't have to go like really, really thorough in the middle there, because we're going to get to the grinder in a moment. Okay. So we're going to use our T10 screwdriver, and there's 3 screws on this bean hopper area. And that's the only 3 screws you need to remove to actually take the top of the machine off. So we're going to go ahead and take out these 3 screws, and they're not very long. They're T10, they're stainless steel. Most of the screws are black screws. The only ones that are stainless steel are the ones up here and a few other odd areas. But when we go to put this back together, because we're only going to take out 2 more screws once we get in here, they're going to be the black ones. So just make sure you put the screws back in the correct location.
We're going to like replace a grinder and only take out 5 screws.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah, these are, I like the Breras because they're very easy, user-friendly in case you ever want to get into the machine and do anything to them. Okay. Most of the repairs aren't really difficult. There's a couple of them. One I specifically don't like, and I won't mention it, but it's a pain in the butt. So we're going to pull this out. We're not going to worry about, well, if you're cleaning and calibrating the grinder, you need to make sure of where the dial is on your grind setting. Okay. Because you want to notate that, so when you put the bean hopper lad back, or the cover back on, you want to make sure that that is in the same position as it was when you took it off.
You want to note where those little dots are?
Yeah, in reference to that little plastic tab.
Okay.
So if it moves on you like that, make sure you put it back to wherever it was located before you took the top off. Okay. So notate that, take a picture, whatever you got to do. If you're replacing the grinder, it doesn't matter where that is right now. Okay. So we'll adjust that when it gets to that point. Right. So right now it's on the largest dot setting. I'll keep that in mind. But we're going to show how to replace the grinder, and we're not really going to replace it. So So now we got the top off. You can see a bunch of stuff in here. Don't worry, it's not scary. It won't bite you. So the grinder's straight underneath this big rubber plastic looking plate thing. And the only thing that we need to do is we need to remove these 2 screws on the back left corner.
Okay.
And those are also T10 screws. And I have a magnetic tip screwdriver. Not that it's needed on this specific job, but it does make things a little bit easier on harder jobs. I say if you ever buy any kind of screwdrivers, always get the magnetic tips because they're always handy to have from time to time.
Okay.
So we're going to set those aside. Now that those 2 screws out of place, I can pop the side panel out like that and the back panel out like that a little bit.
Okay.
And that's only to lift this rubber plastic piece out of there.
Out of the way.
And then I'm just going to let those panels pop back into place.
Okay.
So separate, pull up the cover, and just let go.
Okay.
So now we have that out of the way, you can actually see the whole grinder assembly area. This is your chute that supplies the coffee grounds to your brew group, the grinder motor, and the adjuster. And then your auger that draws the beans down in. So what you need to do if you want to replace this is just pull this whole thing out. There's 3 wires attached to it. Here's one right here. This is a replacement grinder. If you order one, it'll come like this. And one thing I'll point out is that you don't need the wires. That's just excessive work that is not needed. In my experience, I've never had to replace these wires, and it's a lot quicker just to go ahead and do it without replacing the wires. Because you got to pull the panels off, you got to pull the thing off, you got to get to the board, you got to unplug the wires. It's just not worth it. So just remove the wires, and all you're going to do is on this wire here with the 3 little black wires, is you're going to take your flat blade screwdriver, and there's this little plastic clip cover thing over the connector. You're going to go between that clip and the housing to the grinder motor right in here. And then you're going to turn your screwdriver just slightly to pop that clip free. Once you get it popped free, you can pull it right off and out of the way. Now you can grab your 3 wires and pull it out of that connector. And you're just going to toss that off to the side. Then you got the 2 wires on the motor. You got the black wire on the bottom and the white wire on top. Now when we reinstall the grinder with the new grinder assembly, you need to make sure that the black wire is on the bottom and the white wire is on the top. And if you don't do so and you have them reversed, your grinder will go in the opposite direction. It will not pull beans into it, and you'll still have the same problem you probably had before.
Okay.
So you got the little spring clip thingies on here right above my finger here.
Yep.
And you push down on it and you pull it off. I don't know, I did that kind of quick, so I'll just push that back on there. And you push down with your thumb or whatever finger you're using and then pull back on the wire at the same time and it slides right off. Toss that outside, you don't need it. And that's when you would take this grinder out and you slide it out of here, unplug the wires just the same way as I did before, making sure to replace your wires in the same spot. The black wire is on the bottom. I always remembered it when I first started. Black and bottom both start with B, so I always made sure that they went in the same spot here. And the white wire goes on top, and then your connector with your wire here, and then the clip. And the clip goes back on. You also got to make sure the connector is in the same.
Turn the right way.
You go upside down, it won't go in. So you got the 3 holes on one side. And you want to make sure those 3 holes correspond with the 3 connector pins in here. You can see how they're up towards the top.
Towards the top, okay.
So you want to make sure those holes are in the same direction.
Up towards the top.
And you slide it in there and you just push it in. If you have it the other way, it won't go in easily and you'll probably bend the connector pins on the inside there. And then this clip, you aim these 2 prongs at the bottom and they go into that rectangular slot right there underneath the sensor board.
Yep.
And you just kind of get it in position. It's a little bit harder when you have the grinder in there, but you'll feel it, and once it's in the right spot, you just push it and it clips in.
Okay.
Okay? So now you got your wires connected, you can put your grinder back in. The only thing I need to point out is this rubber thing right here. It's kind of a guide holder for the motor area.
Now you want to I just said you want to flop over the white piece here that's on the funnel, right? This guy?
This?
Yep. Because if you're putting in a new grinder, that won't be with the new grinder?
Oh yes, this piece here, I'm sorry, it won't be with the new grinder assembly.
Okay.
So make sure when you pull this grinder out, this goes on your new grinder like that.
Okay.
It only fits on one way, so if you try any other way, it's not going to really work that well.
Okay.
And that's just kind of like a seal holder for the opening that the grinder chute sits into.
Sure.
Also, make sure that the spring that's sitting in here, it just sits in there. Don't worry, it's not broken. It just helps hold the grinder and keeps it from moving around too much.
Okay.
So just make sure it's in the upright position in that circular opening down there.
Okay.
Clean out this area if you have any grounds in there, get that out of the way. And then this rubber guide here, there's 2 pins, one here and one there. That these 2 holes on each side of that grinder rubber holder slides down over. So you're going to guide everything kind of back into place, and you just get your wires to seat, get those to go down in, and get all that to drop down, and now your grinder's back in. So now you have a brand new grinder assembly in there, and you should be good to go.
Okay.
Now, if you're only doing the clean and calibrating, the only thing you have to do without replacing the grinder, null and void everything I just did.
Okay.
And you're going to push down on this thing here. This is your grinder adjustment thing. So when your knob is in here and you push down, you turn it, you're turning this, which turns this gear here.
Okay.
Which makes your burr go up or down when it's turning. So you need to push down on this, and we need to back it out counterclockwise to get the upper burr out of here. So you're gonna push down and you kind of turn, and you're gonna spin your finger at the same time and kind of just work it out the best you can. It might be a little difficult, but you'll eventually get it out.
You're just pushing down and turning with the finger.
And eventually you're going to get the 3 tabs that are on this lower plate or upper burr plate lined up with the 3 slots that are on the lower portion of this grinder. Once you get them lined up, you can pull the upper grinder plate out.
Okay.
Now you can clean this up if you need to. Once you clean that up, you can go in here and you can actually clean up all around here. You're going to want to try to clean all this up as much as possible. You can see I got some loose stuff in here, which I don't need to really clean out. I'm just pointing it out. Now you're going to clean up all this as much as you can. The other thing that you need to try to clean out, which is probably going to be plugged up if you have this scenario where you need to go this route, this channel between the grinder and the chute. It's a little rectangular opening that starts here and it goes through to the other side. You can probably see my tool sticking out.
Yep.
If this gets plugged, which is most of the cases, especially if you're using oily beans, it creates like a cakey paste layer in here. And eventually it just gets so built up that it won't be able to push any grounds through it. And it prevents it from happening, and then your grinder won't pull any beans through it because it just has nowhere to put any of the grounds. So you probably have a plug here, and if that's the case, then you're definitely going to do this and clean it out. And you just kind of pick around it. If you have something you can poke in there, a paper clip, whatever you think you can find that you can just poke around and get it to, you'll see it drop out the other side, and then you can use a vacuum at the same time and get it all cleaned out as much as possible.
Okay.
Once you get it cleaned out, then you take your upper burr plate, and these are the 3 tabs that I was just talking about that are sticking out around this upper burr plate, and they go into these 3 openings. And we need to make sure that the bigger slot tab goes into the bigger slot opening. There's 2 of them that are slightly smaller than the other one. So you're going to want to set this down in, make sure your tabs are lined up with your openings, and we're just going to get it back into position. I'm trying to do it without actually looking over the machine. And I'm trying to see if I can get it. There we go. So now I have them all lined up with the openings that the tabs go through. And I push it down, make sure it's down in there. Now when we go to do this next step, make sure that it's pushed down as you're turning it, because you need the tabs to start going underneath the guide. So push down on this, we're going to go the other direction, and we're going to start turning it to go in. And I don't know if I might have went too far. Let me back it up a little bit so I can show you the tabs. They're starting to disappear.
Yep.
They go underneath a guide. So make sure they go underneath the guide all around, because if you don't get them underneath there and you think you got it turned in all the way, it's actually not in there. You go to grind after you get it all back together, it's just going to lift the plate up and you're just going to grind chunks of beans.
Okay.
And it won't be a very good grind.
You want powder.
You want powder, you don't want chunks.
Yeah.
So now that I know that they're going in, I'll continue turning it until this white line gets to approximately on this angled piece area off of this adjuster thing here. I mean, if it's off one way or the other, it's not going to cause a huge problem if it's there. but I usually tend to try to get in between that plastic part. That is your finest grind setting. If you continue going, this line will eventually stop over here somewhere, and you're basically touching burrs together. You don't want that, because then the grinder won't be able to possibly not move, or if it does, it won't grind really well. If it does grind, it'll be so powdery that your machine will have a hard time brewing.
Okay.
So make sure that line is somewhere in that general position.
There, okay.
Okay. Once you got that in, now you can put the rubber cover back on. Same principle, if you replace the grinder, this is what you're going to do next. You're going to put this rubber cover on, you're going to separate these two pieces here. I usually just use my 2 fingers and kind of pull them out like that.
Yep.
I'm going to set that corner back down in there.
So it's going underneath
Underneath these
there.
2 screw mount tabs right here.
Yeah.
Okay. Once I got it down, I can let that go and push those back over.
Okay.
And now this cover is back over the grinder.
Okay.
I'm going to use my T10, the 2 black screws, and put those back in. And we got that in, and we're going to put this one in. And now the last step would be to put the top cover on. Now mind you, if you did a grinder replacement, this is what you're going to do. If you did not, just remember your dial, or for your knob, where that number or that dot was set before you put it back in there.
Now, if I was just cleaning the grinder, or doing that, I could set it to that finest position, right, and just make
You
sure
could.
my knob up top
that's
is the same?
technically true. You're already going to be
Yeah.
on the finest setting. My
Yeah.
bads.
Okay.
So
I mean, you can remember, right, where that line it was.
yeah, I
and-
mean, if you just vacuum it out and you
Yeah.
don't do like that thorough,
Don't
like where you
actually
take the
take it
plate
apart.
out, then you can just put the
Okay.
cover back on with that knob in the correct position.
Okay.
If you're totally tear it apart like I just did and clean it out, then and you're going to have it at the finest setting, then yes, you're going to do this.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. Glad we
Making
cleared
sense.
that up.
Yeah. Just don't want any
I
confusion.
get a little ahead of myself sometimes.
Yeah.
So in this case, I did clean and calibrate the grinder. It's at the finest setting. When we took it off, it was on the largest dot, which
Yeah.
is the coarsest setting.
Right.
So I'm going to turn that knob all the way over till it stops at the smallest dot.
Yep.
Okay. Now we got this front edge that needs to kind of just sit inside of here. We're going to guide it in, and you're going to see these 2 plastic lips underneath here
Yep.
disappear underneath here.
Okay.
Once you get them underneath there, you can drop the rest of the top down. And if your dial,
Make sure it's still up there.
yeah, if it moved on you, you can always lift it up and turn that dial and get it to drop back down where it's
Okay.
supposed to be. Same thing if you only just vacuumed it out and you have to put your dial in the correct spot.
Yeah.
Like before it was in the large dot, we'll just turn it there and then drop it in there.
Okay.
But we're at the finest setting, so I'm going to put it right back there.
Okay.
After that, you just have your 3 screws. Then I dropped one, and put those back into your hopper. And when you get them down in there, just go until it kind of stops. It's going to keep spinning because it's plastic, so you don't want to strip down.
You don't crank on those. You just.
Yeah, there's a rubber seal between the hopper and this top cover, so it kind of acts like it still wants to keep going. But once you get restriction,
Yeah.
don't
that's the
try to
time
turn it
stop.
anymore.
Okay.
If the hopper does separate from the lid, just make sure that rubber seal goes back in the same position that it has 3 screw holes, so you can just line that all up and put your hopper back in. It's very rare that happens, but just keep it in mind.
Okay.
All right, so here's the screw I dropped. I'm going to actually put that in the machine in the last spot where it needs to go. And we're just going to screw that one in like I mentioned before. Don't over tighten. Go till it has a little bit of restriction and you just want to stop.
Okay.
And then we also need to put the finger guard back in. So you're just going to have this large curved area that goes around the bypass opening.
Make sure that brass.
Yeah, make sure the
spacer's in.
brass spacer and the screw, I'll actually show them out of it.
Yeah. Okay.
So you got your screw and your spacer. So I usually put the screw in there if it comes out for whatever reason, and then I drop it down there. If it doesn't drop in all the way, you can wiggle it and it'll finish dropping in the rest of the way. So now we're just gonna set it over the auger and let it drop down in there.
And that goes. I mean, that kind of only goes on there one way, right?
Yeah, that's why I mentioned the curve right
Yeah,
here.
okay.
It can't really, like all these other spots won't fit on there,
Okay.
so you won't be able to get it in there.
Okay. And the T20.
And the T20, you're just gonna go in there. This one, you're just gonna snug it down pretty good until it stops.
Okay.
You don't have to worry about stripping it. That brass collar in there is gonna protect the plastic that it's around, and then your finger guard's in, and then you're good to go.
All right. Anything else we should know about that, Ted?
No.
All right. Thanks for taking us through that.
You're welcome.